But hold on now. I do want to get into your A/B option though. Of like, why do you think this is a war crime?
It's either a war crime because we haven't effectively legally declared war. We did a surprise attack, and if that facility was predominantly civilian,
It's
we
not
dropped
civilian.
bombs on a.
It's not civilian if they're making weapons with it. It's a fucking weapons.
Okay, if you're not at war with them, we're not allowed to go to Germany and be like, hey, Germany, you know that Kalashnikov, that that HK facility that's right there? We're not at war with you, but we really don't like the fact you're making HKs. We're blowing up the HK facility.
They are at war with our ally. That's all it takes. That's all it takes.
Then just say we're at war. Stop dancing around the fact that we're at war. This is a war.
No, this is an airstrike with bombs.
See, then you have no principles. You don't even understand linguistics of these things. You don't understand the topic at hand. You are a sycophant.
I'm a sycophant.
All right.
That's not a ad hominem. That's an assessment of your argumentation style. For the record, you are sycophantic. You are aligning yourself purely as you've so keenly said multiple times. Everyone else is orange. If they're against Trump, it's orange man bad. If they're doing X, Y, and Z, it's orange man bad. All of that. You are to the point where orange man can do no wrong. And that is sycophantic mentality that leads to sycophantic logic and inability to see the problem at hand. So we are at war. If we do an airstrike on an enemy of an ally who is at war with that enemy, we just got pulled into a war, which makes us what? At war. Or we aren't at war and we bombed a civilian facility, and that civilian facility is now blown the hell up. And by definition, meets the definition of a war crime.
All right, now, yes, dude. I'm sorry, but your second opponent has arrived. Skip, what's going on, my man? Any timed out again?
Oh my God!
I know he made it in there.
I heard him too.
All right, well, we'll wait till we come back on. But okay, guys, we're gonna keep it pushing on that note. I ain't gonna lie, you guys' conversation right now. It's entertaining. I'm not even gonna lie, guys. It's very entertaining.
We were doing this before in voice chat. So, for the record, no ill will intended. I have a very intense argumentative style, and for once, I'm not stuck arguing with Dave, who only has 3 sentences that can come out of his mouth.
I can knock it down from 5 to 3 if you want.
No, you're good, man. Like you bring valid stuff. It's just the logic you're using isn't branching correctly. It isn't linking up.
All right, now Skip.
There's pieces in the logic that are missing.
All right, so you say you have some disagreements with the man guest dude?
Well, yeah. I mean, like, I was sitting there, like, basically just the whole time just shaking my head, like, what the hell? Now, I didn't hear, like, the last 5 minutes because I've been trying to unscrew this whole, get in, because I accidentally blocked my mic and I had to go to a different browser and copy and paste and all that bullshit. But anyway, I'm here. So his thing about war crimes, that's crap. Jefferson didn't declare war on the Barbary pirates. Nobody accused him of any war crimes when he went and kicked their ass to get back a bunch of people that they'd enslaved. Okay. So basically, presidents from early on in our republic, because you had, listen, man, let me make a point here before you interrupt me.
I just wanted to bring up the Barbary pirates. I've studied them pretty closely.
From early on in the history of this republic, there have been military actions taken that did not rise to the level of a declared war, that it were in no way war crimes. Okay.
Agreed.
So the president is allowed to take action, military action, in defense of the nation's interests. So now you can sit there and say all kinds of things about whether Iran's nuclear program was peaceful or not, but peaceful countries, see, you don't need 60% enriched uranium for peaceful purposes. As a matter of fact, it's completely unuseful. for use for peaceful purposes. So it's not for peaceful purposes. Like if we apply Occam's razor, it's not for peaceful purposes. Now, North Korea developed ICBMs before they developed a usable nuclear warhead. Even though they have like major disagreements with a number of other countries, like one of which is South Korea, have you noticed that they've never actually launched a ballistic missile? So, like North Korea, we consider them to be a relatively potentially unstable as far as like not rational nation. And yet that nation has still managed to never fire a ballistic missile, never mind a nuke, at another country. Israel, from what we know, has nuclear weapons. They've never nuked anybody. Pakistan, you pointed out that Pakistan hasn't exactly been friendly with us, and I agree on that. However, they've got nuclear weapons and they've managed to never nuke anybody or launch a ballistic missile at anybody. Same goes for India. So, but Iran, like as soon as they got ballistic missiles, like they couldn't wait to lob some at Israel. And as a matter of fact, I think they fired some at some installations of ours in Iraq. So your logic there, like you've got a regime that is really, really like not rational. Like they do things that like as soon as they get a more powerful weapon, they can't wait to use it. They've said death to Israel. They've said death to America. And just because they don't have a weapon now that can reach our shores doesn't mean that it's not possible for them to develop one. I mean, you yourself acknowledge their mathematical brilliance, so there's no reason to believe that they won't eventually come up with that. So it is in our interest for them to never possess a nuclear weapon, and any steps taken towards that, casting them as some kind of war crime is not only weak, it's disingenuous. That's a
Okay.
terrible
Well,
argument to make. And the
then I'm
fact
gonna.
that you haven't been effectively countered on your bullshit to this point is just astounding.
Well,
Because
see,
your
that's the
shit is
thing
pretty
is
weak, bro.
no,
I was
because I'm about
Try
to.
trying.
me,
I'm
try
about
me.
to.
Come on.
Okay.
Bring a good argument.
Your first argument, your first example is Jefferson versus the Barbary States. Okay.
Not a declared war. Killed people,
Of
not a war crime.
of the of the of
Early
the
in our history.
okay
Early
of
in
the
our
things.
history.
Okay. I gave you time. I'm going to take my time now. Of
Okay,
the
go ahead.
things that Jefferson with the Navy and the newly formed Marine Corps that were hit by Jefferson during the war with the Barbary Coast states, those were all military assets, were they not?
No, I don't believe that they were all military assets. As a
No, they
matter of
were.
fact, it seems to me like they actually like pillaged the court of the government there.
No,
They had to force them to
that's
their
a state.
knees.
That's a state asset.
Also,
That's a state asset.
also, wait a second. Hold on a second.
It was our
I
No,
believe
nation.
no,
that.
no,
I
no,
believe.
no,
Hold
no.
on.
Pause. Skip. If your answer to winning a debate is just yammering on and then talking over me, that's not going to win you. Because
Oh
I'll say,
no, this from a guy who pretty much held court for like the last, I don't know, hour. I mean, it's been a half an hour since I started listening.
okay,
And you
well,
just rambled on and on. You just talked all over everybody.
starting
So
with the
stop that.
starting with the Barbary state and
Hmm.
moving forward through the entire history of the United States,
Hmm.
there have been multiple occasions where
Hmm.
events of non-declared wars have occurred, and the
Hmm.
presidents have utilized tools at their assets to initiate violence as a means of diplomacy.
Hmm.
Now, in this instance, if this is not an actual war, which I've already, in the 5 minutes that you were trying to get your mic taken care of, have completely resoundedly proven it is a war, so it deals
No,
with
it's
the
not.
war crime issue. It's a war.
Why? There's no declared war between us and Iran.
If we are stepping into a conflict between an ally and an
No,
enemy that are in a war,
no,
what are we in?
no, sir. Listen to me. There is a very powerful distinction made by a declaration of war. Okay, we are not at war with Iran.
Okay,
Iran
then
could
it's a war
declare
crime.
war on us, and we would not necessarily consider ourselves to be at war with Iran.
Then
And
it's
if
a
we are
war
not
crime.
officially,
Because you have to look at
wait a
international
second.
law as well.
Wait a second. You're insisting that no civilians were killed in the Barbary conflict is bullshit. Okay, there has never been a conflict
Did
between
I? No,
opposing
I was
sides
asking. I was
that
asking
where
you.
civilians were not killed.
Hey, I was asking you. Were civilians
You're
killed
asking
during
what?
that event? I didn't
I'm
insist that
sure
there
that they
weren't.
were.
Okay.
Yes, you
Then
did. You said they
Jefferson.
were all military assets.
No,
You
I said
said
military.
Jefferson only
I said
engaged.
the boats were military assets, and I said a state facility was a military asset. But if civilians were killed and a war was not officially
Dude,
declared, that's
Can
a
I
war
say
they
crime.
something real quick?
it was the Marine Corps' first forced
Guys,
landing.
Oh,
Okay,
all
yeah,
right,
I'm
guys,
sure
hold on,
people were
time
killed.
out real quick. Now I do want to have Monty make a little bit of side commentary on the side here, but also shout out to Fox Chase. He says Iran making threats to Trump like he ain't got 34 felonies. Found out. All right, Monty, go ahead and give your comment, and you two can resume the argument.
Yeah. So your assertion that it can only be one or the other. All right. Let's follow that into that. That you just said that the Barbary pirates, while there were civilians that died, that even if it wasn't a military asset, it was still a state asset. The uranium enrichment facilities in the state of Iran are state facilities.
And
McDonald's
I
doesn't
was
own them.
just about to make my point on that. If civilians are killed and there isn't a declaration of war between two states, if state A and state B, if state A does a military action against state B and it is not a declared war and civilians die in that, it is a war crime.
There is a declared war, though.
I-
Israel declared war on Iran.
Then at this point, if we are stepping in to aid Israel, we are at war.
France
No,
aided us and didn't declare
no,
war.
that's not true.
International law.
You can't just unilaterally declare that that's a
It's
war.
international
It
law.
requires an act of Congress to declare war. Okay. So now
Okay.
the War Powers
However,
Act gives the president
our
formalizes what
constitution,
he
our
had.
constitution's one thing, but a war crime can be handed down by the international courts and be said
Well,
that's a fucking war crime.
you know what? Good luck making that argument in The Hague, bro. But you know what? It's boring here because there are a lot of other arguments that are much more interesting than that one because that one's
Oh,
just
so now
that's
no, see
practically a
that's
throwaway.
a pure straightforward analysis. It is something that America has been violating for the better part of the last 75-ish years now, since we came out of the tail end of
Just
World War II.
All right, hold on,
We've
I
gotten
got a
just
good
away with it.
because
argument, guys.
listen, you want to make this a centerpiece of your argument, and the fact of the matter is you can sit there and say that all day long, and it carries zero weight. It carries zero weight. Like the whole rest of the world is not beating the drum for
It
The Hague to prosecute a
is a
bunch of Americans for
it is a
shit that's happened over
geopolitical
70 years.
it is a geopolitical strategic failure
Yeah.
of the
Okay.
Trump administration
Then
was my initial thesis argument. I stated this was a
why is
geopolitical
this
strategic
why is it
fuck up
why is
because
it a failure?
now we already know that the international courts were absolutely willing to charge Netanyahu with war crimes and crimes against humanity. And now we're stepping into a
Okay.
war alongside them. And the first act of that, because we didn't properly declare or we didn't do things in the proper channels or something, that gives the international courts the grounds to go, all right, cool,
You're trying.
stamp.
Okay. All right. Hold on for a
That's
second
where
here, buddy. Let me
no,
insert
listen
something.
to me.
Okay.
No,
No,
listen to my
I
point.
listened to you. I've listened to a bunch of your
No,
shit.
you
Okay.
haven't heard
You
my
haven't listened.
point yet. The
What?
geopolitical
Then make
strategic
it.
issue, the geopolitical strategic issue is now if Trump gets hit with one of these, it makes diplomacy on the global scale extremely hard for the Trump administration for the remainder of his
What
3.5
credibility does
years.
the International Criminal Court have? Let me ask you that.
Um,
I mean, honestly,
it makes
did
it
they?
impossible to just land in a country that actually follows those rules. Like if you go to a country that has that, like technically Trump violated the international
Okay,
court.
okay,
The international court's already
a
pissy
lot
at
of
him.
what you're talking about, a lot of what you're talking about is moral authority, which, what you can sit there and call something a war crime, and you use that to diminish the moral authority of whoever you're accusing. And
No, I'm talking about the international laws.
Hold on,
They will
hold
still
on, hold
listen
on.
to
You know
us.
what?
It's not like
Okay.
International law has really, like, what force does it have? Can you
no one
enforce
follows
it?
it except for us.
Okay. So international law. I mean, if there's two
What happens
schools
if
of thought on
what happens if the
international.
U.S. get hit by sanctions?
Okay, hold on. I'm asking you. I'm asking you what moral authority the International Criminal Court has, and you're apparently attributing great moral authority to it. But
No,
I'm
I'm
wondering.
attributing.
Hold on. I'm not finished, bro. I'm wondering what kind of moral authority they have when I never really heard them banging the drum to go after the guy who planned October 7th.
Oh,
So it's bullshit, bro. It doesn't mean anything. Okay, so
Because
Netanyahu can't go to the
the
Hague.
international court deals with
Yeah,
state
when you're talking, when
level.
you're talking about it's not authorized by, like, we don't
No,
participate in it.
the international court only goes after state level diplomats who would otherwise be immune within any other channels. So
Right.
when you're talking
Okay.
about the
So, but he claimed. Hold
geopolitical,
on a second.
who's gonna come to the United States and drink from
another.
our
Hamas
So
eggs?
hold
claimed
on a second, Stu.
Hamas
Come on.
All right,
Hamas
hold on, guys.
I
claimed
Hold on,
sat
guys.
here
Hold on,
Hamas
quietly
everybody.
claimed
Everybody,
begging
time out, guys. Time out, time out.
Hamas claimed to be a government. So he was
they're not
supposedly
a
like part of
recognized
the
state.
Hold
Hamas.
on, guys. Do I need a moderator?
But
Do I
they
need to
are
give
by some
everybody the
people.
3
Yes,
minutes
please.
here, or
Palestine's not a recognized state.
all right?
It's not doesn't have a seat
Ah,
in the UN. It doesn't have a seat
that's
on the
weak.
international courts.
No. I think that's weak. I think you're making excuses now.
No, I'm
They
telling you what
don't.
the international law
No,
is. I
no.
don't give a shit
They
what you
want to
think is
prosecute.
weak.
They want to prosecute who they want to prosecute. They don't want to go after Hamas. They do want to go after Netanyahu. I don't think that equates to a
No, it
lot of
comes down
moral
to very
authority.
simple. The court makes a decision, and if the court hands down the decision, now the UN is left with a decision of, okay, how do we enact any kind of
I
action
I
against that?
believe I believe that the International Criminal Court has actually convicted people and imprisoned people who
Yes,
were
when they're
not part of
actually
a
brought
legitimate
to the Hague,
who
and they're
who
usually
were
small
not.
little countries in
Yes,
Africa
but first they
or
put out a
Southeast
warrant.
Asia.
First they put out, they say that somebody's accused of a crime, and they did that to Serbians who didn't have, like, they weren't legitimate state actors. They did lock those people up, okay, for
Yeah.
genocides, for ethnic cleansing. So that's not. So what you're saying doesn't
No,
hold. It doesn't hold
that was
true.
the Hague. That's not the same level of the international court that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the international court that handles state actors, diplomats, heads of state,
No,
and
I don't think that
what
the ICC is limited that way, bro. I think you're barking up. I think you're
the
making shit up.
levels. No, the levels of the ICC are compartmentalized that way. In the high level of the ICC that went after Netanyahu and Putin in the last couple of years, that makes their international travel challenging at this point, and technically the United States violated the ICC's warrant because technically
The
Netanyahu.
U.S. is not a member of the ICC. It does not even recognize the ICC.
I get
You
that.
don't know that?
I no, I get that. But what I'm saying is, on
So
a
how do you
technical
violate
level,
something when you're not a signatory to it?
you've when you're talking
You
about
don't.
international law, it becomes
No, there
very
is no
gray
such
area.
thing as
Becomes a
international
very
law.
gray area
Is a
because
misnomer. Listen, I
no,
mean, as far as international relations goes, there's two schools of thought. There's realism and there's liberalism. And liberalism believes in international
no,
institutions
there's
and
a
wants
third.
to legitimize
There's a
them.
third. You're missing the third. Real politic, and real politics tends to
That's
outweigh realism and
that's
liberalism
realism.
every day of the week.
No,
No,
All right,
real
guys.
politics
All right,
real
guys.
isn't
Hold
that.
on. I
politic
do
is
want to get in the
different.
middle of this here because now I do think this debate might need a moderator because people are enjoying it, but they're not really liking how you're talking over each other. So I am going to give you guys 3 minutes to for rebuttal and reply. So we're gonna first start off with Skip, and then we're gonna go to Guest Dude. But I do want to start off on this argument, if you guys don't mind, that because I know
Mm.
that Guest Dude, you don't agree with what Trump's doing with Iran, but Skip, you do, right?
Well, I feel like, um, well, let's put it this way. I'm willing to argue for it at this point, yeah, because I think that there's a window of opportunity. There was a window, or there existed a window of opportunity in which to take action, and that allowing Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon would be catastrophic. Like, people are saying this is going to start World War III. It's not. As a matter of fact, it probably prevented World War III. Because as soon as Iran got a functional nuclear weapon, they would use it. And by all accounts, they are actually capable, or were capable, until we scattered all of their enriched plutonium or uranium. They were actually capable of creating a weapon about as effective as the first atomic bombs that we dropped on Japan during World War II,
All
which
right.
isn't really a high level of sophistication, but it would be enough to really fuck Israel up, or any other person, any other city in the Mideast, or it's really not that far away from them being able to put an orbital weapon that could reach the United States, a suborbital weapon that could reach the United States. North Korea got one that could reach Seattle. Why? I mean, there's no reason to believe that the Iranians could not get to that point technologically. So, and it's quite possible that the very first indication we would have that they did would be a bright flash. So, no, they can't be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. I believe that destroying their capacity right now, and whatever they've got enriched, is hopefully scattered among a bunch of busted up rocks about 200 feet underground. It's going to be pretty hard to police that up and actually make a weapon out of it. So, yeah, I think
All
that I think that the action was exactly what probably needed to happen.
all right. And you have 1 minute and 17 seconds. Do you want to concede the rest of it?
I'll reserve it, perhaps,
Ooh.
to reply.
All right. Yo, guess do. Go ahead and start your 3 minutes.
All right, so I understand the inherent fear of Iran getting a nuclear weapon, but I challenge the logic that they. Let's start with two factors. One, getting an ICBM is not a challenge. Bill Nye bought one in the late '90s from an old Soviet Union cache and was trying to put a satellite up. So buying an ICBM, not a challenge. And they live next to a country that has nukes that they're allied with. So this putting the two together would not have been outside of their capacity with the amount of oil that they produce. They have enough money. They have enough back channels. They could easily have done it. Which leads me to the conclusion that they're not attempting to procure a nuclear weapon for utilization. This idea that, yes, when they got long range missiles, they did X, or when they got X weapon, they did Y. I understand that, but they seemingly, when it comes to nuclear proliferation, they're following the logic of the second we have one or are close enough to one, they are in a negotiation position. Just like North Korea has been in a much better negotiation position on the global stage since they've gotten their nukes. They're trying to get that card, and they know that just buying a nuke and just buying an ICBM is not enough for them to do that, because just having one nuke and one ICBM, that could be destroyed easily. They can have some spec op team or CIA operation or X, Y, or Z thing happen where that nuke is destroyed or lost. So having just one that they purchased isn't the answer. They want to have the means to produce and show that they have the means to produce and test and utilize a nuclear weapon so that they can be equal on the playing field for negotiation reasons. The risk is definitely there. There is a extreme risk of them doing something insane with it.
45-second warning.
But they've had 30 plus years to do this, and they haven't. And if it was just simply a matter of they want a nuke to use a nuke so they can do things to Israel, they would have just bought one, or they would have purchased the materials to do a dirty bomb attack. A dirty bomb attack in Israel would be just as devastating, if not more devastating, than an atomic bomb detonation. And they could have easily handed one off to Hamas and done a dirty bomb attack in Jerusalem at any point.
And all righty. And now Monty, did you want to do you want to have a 3 minutes as well, or do you want to give it back to Skip?
I don't think that's fair, so I'll just take a minute because I don't want it 2-on-1.
All right, take a minute. All right, go ahead.
So my whole thing is my idea, my understanding of this would be that they would not just buy a bomb. You're right, and they would want their technology to be in a point in which they could hit the United States and Israel simultaneously, because it is a crazy regime and they believe death to America, death to Israel. So they're not gonna show their hand until they're ready to go, and that means doing as much damage to America and Israel simultaneously through their technological advances that they don't have yet. And that's that. That's all I got to say.
All right. And all right, Skip.
I still have my minute and 17 seconds, do I?
Actually, no, you have a renewed 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I would say, first of all, I would like to point out that Iran and Pakistan are absolutely not allies. Pakistan is a primarily Sunni country. As a matter of fact, every year in Pakistan, Shia are murdered while they're usually when they're on pilgrimages. And Iran complains loudly about it. Not only that, but they also have a lot of problems because the Baluchis, who occupy space in Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, have been a sore spot because they're a pain in the ass for the Iranians. They're also a pain in the ass for the Pakistanis. And they both bitch at each other because they say the other side isn't doing enough, and they're harboring Baluchi separatists who are fucking with the other country. So no, they are absolutely not friendly on many levels. And yeah, they're kind of, their relationship is kind of strained. The logic about they only want from one for negotiation is basically fabricated out of whole cloth. It's their cover story. It's their no, let me tell you this, let me tell you this when you're about to throw them off the bridge. Now they did warn that they were going to do something this week, actually the past few days, which I think just had a wrench thrown in it, which may have actually, they were implying that they had some kind of epic weapon that was going to be remembered for generations. That may have actually been a dirty bomb because they've been using conventional warheads, and just packing a bunch of crap around it, a bunch of radioactive shit around it wouldn't be that hard. And except now their radioactive shit is mostly scattered underground. So that's going to be a little bit difficult for them. The other thing is our intel. You mentioned, I heard you earlier talking about the intelligence community, and you want to, you're saying our intelligence community, and then you say our intelligence community says that they weren't, and then later you actually basically said our intelligence community couldn't be trusted. And I believe that that's what's just been proved, and that the Israeli intelligence is so good that they can actually kill a nuclear scientist in his bed without even damaging any of the other apartments. So I think that the Israelis probably, the information that they have about what Iran was planning on doing and how capable they were of getting it done is probably a lot more accurate. And I think I'll count on their stuff. That's all I got.
And all right.
Can I step in on that one, just on that last point?
Yeah, you want to go ahead and take a minute, or just
no. So I would say that while I agree with most of what you just said, I would say that Israel is, they do have plans to destabilize Muslim countries in the Middle East, and we have been playing into their hand. So it's hard to say whether that intel is credible. Now, do I believe that they could gather it? Absolutely. Do I believe that they would share it with us if it wasn't positive in their favor? That's a little bit more debatable, but
all right. Now let's get over here to the super chat. Shout out to my man Maine. He says Iran declared war. We didn't, LMAO. And shout out to my man Fox Chase. He says Iran should ask North Korea for help at this point. I'm like,
oh shit.
And shout out to my man Maine coming in again. He says Bill Nye is a cuck. Oh wow.
Wow.
And all right, now guess, dude, you ready to take your 3?
Yep. All right. So, all right. Yeah. Going to the conversation about Iran and Pakistan. Yes, I'm fully aware the Freedom Front that exists along the Pakistani border and in Afghanistan. I spent 3-something years in the Kandahar region, down in Helmand province. So I'm very familiar with the shit show that organization is capable of. And I'm aware that, yes, and since about the middle of 2024 up till about April of 2025, May of 2025, the tensions between Iran and Pakistan have gotten more sour. But I'm also aware that I believe it was 6 days ago, the Pakistani government put out a press release stating they would utilize a nuclear weapon if Israel utilized a nuclear weapon against Iran. They would nuke Israel. So that does not sound to me like, yes, they have strained relationships, but they are still very much allied in their disdain of Israel, to the point that if Iran was like, hey, give me a nuke so I can hit Israel, Pakistan's going to be like, cool, here's a nuke, hit Israel. That's the point that I'm making is, if this was all about just getting a weapon, they're neighboring a country that is not signed on to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, produces nuclear weapons, and has 3 facilities to do what they need to do to continue producing nuclear weapons and material. If Iran was just about getting the weapon and firing it, they would. Now, this idea that they want to get some large quantity of these weapons to try to bring total death to America, even the Russians barely had the capacity to pull that off. And that it was at the height of the Cold War. Like, they would have had both sides, both the United States and Russia, built up the stockpile of ICBMs and bombs that we did, because we knew a large number of those weren't going to reach their targets and they weren't going to do the job, and we were going to have to saturate bomb with nuclear weapons. So Iran is nowhere near the point where they have the capacity to reach out and touch us with enough nuclear weaponry to do anything of harm to us. Yes, they could very well nuke Tel Aviv, nuke Jerusalem, but if they were just about nuking that, they could have purchased the weapons from Pakistan, got themselves some black market ICBM, retooled it, re-rigged it, and fired the damn thing off already, which tells me this is a negotiation point. Yes, it's fabricated from whole cloth by their bullshit, but it does point to them being about the negotiation. If it was just about the weapon, they would have just done it already.
And all righty. And all right, now, Skip, before you go ahead and reply back to that, I do want to play this quick video on news coming in from Tel Aviv.
Yeah, Trace, right now, air raid sirens are sounding across Tel Aviv amid incoming ballistic missile fire. We've not yet seen any of Israel's air defense systems active, but we're going to wait and see what happens here. There are sirens, according to the initial alerts, sounding across the entirety of central Israel, all the way from Haifa in the north to the Negev Desert in the south. We also understand at this moment, this alert has gone out to everyone in this part of the country, sending millions of people into bomb shelters. Many people trying to get underground. There are a few cars out on the road right now, but you remember we talked about those emergency orders that went into effect from Israel's Home Front Command just before this missile attack took place. Again, we don't yet see any air defense systems that are active over the city at this moment. But we're certainly waiting to see how this develops. This is the initial Iranian response to the American strikes that took place overnight, targeting the country's nuclear facilities. There are also initial reports of air raid sirens sounding in Jordan as these missiles fly over that country toward Israel. And so, again, this is a very common occurrence over the past 9 days here, Trace, as these sirens will sound. They're interceptors. Yep. All right. And so we're going to get inside here. Stay with us, Trace. Get in.
Yeah.
All right, let's go.
And all righty, Skip. Did you want to make any points after, G-Do? I'm not G-Do,
Yeah.
but let's do. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that the country that gives Iran a nuke would have a few really, really bad years. I don't think that any country, because for instance, like Pakistan developed nuclear weapons because China gave them the technology. We know that. We called China out on it. North Korea, same thing. Okay. And I would say that the danger would be that the Chinese would try to accelerate Iran's acquisition of a nuclear weapon without actually physically giving them any, because there's ways of detecting just from the residue, for instance, like where the weapon came from. Um, they leave signatures just like any other device, and like the exact materials, the blends that are used, and so on would leave a signature that would be pretty inarguable. So if they nuked Israel with a Chinese-made weapon, it would come back to roost on the Chinese. And if the Chinese think that they've got financial issues now, I think that would probably make them pariahs. You mentioned weapons of mass destruction earlier. You mentioned COVID. There is every possibility that that was in fact an actual purposeful release. Because if you look at it, like China really wanted to disrupt the political process in the West because they were taking it on the chin, and they wanted to disrupt things, and they wanted it to be deniable, but they wanted to have a very disruptive impact. And I think that even if any of the intelligence services figured out that it was actually done on purpose, they wouldn't say anything, because if they did, the families of 7 million dead people worldwide would call for war with China. And we don't, I mean, there's hundreds of thousands, millions of families in the United States who would be foaming at the mouth if they felt that it was purposeful and that it wasn't an accident. So, I mean, it's quite possible that that was actually a purposeful act and that they've essentially gotten away with it. Um, I think that actions short of war, which Iran has been doing through their proxies for quite some time. There's a reason why they're called the world's leading sponsor of terrorism, and trying to cast anyone else, any other country that's involved in this, like Israel or the United States, as a terrorist regime is just completely laughable. But
And y'all
everybody
not
knows that Iran has been fielding or funding those groups all around the Middle East and destabilizing Sunni countries in Shia interests.
all
That's the
right.
real fight.
All right, in time. Guess, did you have a reply for that one, or
All right, so the I'm gonna keep it narrowed down to it's laughable that the United
Mhm.
States and Israel have funded terrorism or have acted
Absolutely
in.
laughable.
No.
Yep.
Going all the way back to just the preliminary organization of Project Paperclip, the formation of the Green Berets was founded on a structure of reactivating SS battalions to put them behind enemy lines inside of behind the Iron Curtain. Going all the way back to 1946 and 1947, we were willing to reactivate SS battalions to disrupt Russia.
oh, and is that all?
Jump ahead.
Mm,
No,
okay.
jumping ahead over the next decades. Korea is probably the only war we didn't get dirty in. Vietnam, we actively did all kinds of dirty shit all the way in Cambodia, Laos, all up and down that area, funding 6 different organizations through U.S.E.T and the CIA that acted as terrorist organizations and pushed all the way in, and were very likely partially responsible for the Burmese Civil War. Jumping ahead to the 70s and 80s, the CIA was actively committing terrorist activity inside the United States through MK Ultra and its extensions. The crack epidemic of the 80s was a CIA oopsie. If that's not terrorism, I don't know what the hell is. The 90s we kind of dialed it down a little bit. We chilled, but we were also funding a bunch of different things all over Africa, trying to reestablish ourselves there. And we were doing all kinds of weird, crazy drug war shit up and down South America. The biggest cartel, I can't remember how to pronounce it, starts with an S. The biggest cartel in Mexico got their
Sinaloa.
original training. Got their original training from Green Berets in Colombia, and then moved up through Central America and wiped out all the original Mexican cartels and became the dominant cartel in Mexico. America sponsors terrorism. Iran, the world's leading. They're still in the minor leagues. We are AAA Yankee level. We are the Yankees with the best possible team put together to do it. The CIA has been running rampant for 70 years.
15 seconds.
And the CIA was absolutely nothing more than the merger of the top echelons of the SS's intelligence agencies with the OSS's intelligence agencies, the merging of two eagles to form an extension of the Nazi government into perpetuity through Project Paperclip. Like, this is all historical fact. It's inside the papers.
All right, time. And yo, Scott, Skip, you got a reply?
Oh man. Well, I mean, that sounded like a litany of shit that was made up in a fucking Russian troll farm, honestly. Um, all this crap about now look, there were covert actions in Southeast Asia. There was stuff that was potentially questionable as far as like blending interests with potentially, I don't know, drug lords and stuff when it came to like Air America. But as far as like at the origins of the SS being to reactivate, or the origins of the SF being to reactivate SS battalions, bro, no. Okay, so the Green Berets. I mean, now if you want to go back to like the commandos in World War II, still no. All right, but the Green Berets were actually begun in the early '60s by Kennedy, by which time most of the former SS were already retiring from the French Foreign Legion. So that's bullshit, bro. And I can't believe that you actually come on here and start spewing a bunch of conspiracy theory crap that sounds like it came right out of the Kremlin, who was eager to paint the United States as somehow being like the new Nazis, like we somehow incorporated them. Okay, that's all Kremlin propaganda from the Soviet Union, and you're sucking it up like a Hoover. What the hell is wrong with you, bro? I thought you wore a uniform once. I spent 3 years in Afghanistan. I was all over Afghanistan. I talked fucking coin in Kabul for a while. And I traveled all the way down to Helmand and taught those people down there. I've been all over Afghanistan. I saw a whole bunch of shit. And I wore the uniform for 31 fucking years. And I can't believe that you're going to sit there and demonize this nation whose uniform you supposedly wore like a Kremlin propagandist. I'm offended, bro. I am deeply offended.
I'm glad you're offended, because you're a product of Cold War mentality. You're still blaming stuff on the Kremlin, like the Kremlin hasn't been broken over the back of a trench war for the last 4 years. I mean, come the hell on. You're scared of the Kremlin.
Not scared of them, but you're buying their stories. They made all those stories up, and you swallowed it. You swallowed it.
Make all these stories up. These are actual.
No, they made them up, and you read it and believed it. No, that's not historical facts, bro. The SS had nothing to do with the special forces that were formed in like 1960.
Let's let Guest Dude explain himself on your accusation of calling the Kremlin.
Well, okay. And I'm going to need more than 3 minutes, because this like, here's the thing.
All right, guys. So Skip, let's go ahead and let Guest Dude explain himself, because you did make a heavy accusation on my man. So let's give him his 3 minutes.
Now here's the thing. Okay. After World War II, we took in the Nazi intelligence agencies. The Nazi intelligence agencies gave us intel, and we merged together Army intelligence at the end of World War II with Nazi intelligence. They then assisted in deactivating behind enemy lines inside the Iron Curtain SS battalions. The techniques learned from that were written down by Army Psychological Operations and later utilized to develop the techniques that would become core to the Green Berets behind enemy lines establishment of freedom fighters and insurgencies on our behalf. That is the foundational buildup. We learned from what we did in the resistance with the Maquis. We built up on it with Nazi intelligence, reactivating SS battalions all along the Russian front, and then we adapted that further. And we took these techniques through. This is historical fact. The evidence. It's dude. There are books and books and books of it written by the guys who were there. This isn't Kremlin shit. This is like memoirs of guys who are like, I got to do this really cool thing where I was in charge of an SS battalion after it was reactivated. We fought alongside Germans against SS multiple times. We reactivated battalions because now they're not technically SS. They're part of the West German military. But they were an SS battalion that was reactivated and renumbered underneath these things and then done behind enemy lines. Or we were reactivating ones that were captured behind enemy lines that we were breaking out of Soviet-controlled POW camps and then reactivating them and letting them run rampant all over the Iron Curtain, gathering intel and data for us and things that became useful to us to build our NATO defense pact and against the Warsaw Pact.
That's weird.
This is what occurred during that period of time in the post-war period in 1945 to about 1952. Then we got dragged over into Korea at the tail end, at the beginning of the 50s. We spent a bunch of time over there fighting the Chinese. The Russians helped out a little bit, and we took the techniques of all of this and we adapted it for the Vietnam War. And from there, CIA had already developed itself as a clandestine operation that had fingers all over the world. We were taking down the Arab League. We were taking down all kinds of what is the word? Bolahism in Central America. We were
10 seconds.
actively moving all over the place. Now, outside of my 3 minutes, you attacking me in my time in the service for being patriotic and thinking the United States is better than this, and I'm tired of us being the bad guy. Yes, I did my time. I served my nation. I joined underneath the idea that America is a good country that can do good things. And the more and more I've read, the more and more I've studied, the more and more I've dived into the subject, the more and more I've found we aligned ourselves with bad elements. Because the problem with war is when you go to war with another country and it's a true war, one-on-one, not these little proxy wars we've been fighting, like a true hard war. The last hard war we fought was against the Nazis. You can't walk away without taking a bit of that with you. And our origin myth as the modern America, the neoliberalism versus Marxism
And
narrative that we
time.
had since. Well, no, you coming at me on a personal level, calling me out on a personal level for not being patriotic and having issues with this. That is the pure definition of patriotism. I have issues with America not meeting its damn standards, not living up to its principles, and not being what it can be. I thought that was the whole point of Make America Great Again and America First. But here we are, bullshitting around in the Middle East again while we have people dying in the streets from overdoses, while we have all the issues we have going on in America. We're getting dragged into a war by a fascist state.
What fascist state? What fascist state? I need a clarification before I respond.
Israel is by definition a fascist state.
All right, now Skip, before
And
you
you don't.
respond though,
Okay.
let me catch up on these super chats real quick. Appreciate y'all patience, by the way. And shout out Dr. Lou. He says, "Set, this is my favorite show you have done." I'm not gonna lie, you guys are having a really great conversation. Even I'm learning a lot. And shout out Fox Chase. He says, "I've seen more war on the weekends in Chirac." I mean, stay out the hood, my brother. Stay out the hood, my brother. And shout out Maine. He says, "Sucking up commie BS like Hoover." And all right. And shout out to my man Vlastine. He says, "You have some people here that are trying to ban people that have supported your channel because they don't like what they are saying." Well, we can't have that, man. We can't have that censorship in here. And all right, let's shout out Luke coming in again. He says Alex Jones is the greatest historian within the last 20 years. How do you know it all? Not know that the satanic globalists are the government, that they have influence, good versus evil. And all right, shout out my man Luke. Hope I didn't rush through that one right there. But all right, now Skip, go ahead and give your reply.
All right. Well, first of all, yeah, dude, I am surprised, and I didn't call you any names. I just said I was disappointed. Okay. So if you want to take umbrage to that, well, I think you need to reconsider your information sources because none of that makes any sense. All the stuff about, SS battalions being reactivated, no, that didn't happen. But okay, you're here's the thing: is post World War II, the Soviet Union cast the West as being the inheritors of the Nazi legacy, and that we absorbed. Hey, you know what? They sucked up a bunch of scientists and so on as well. Um, yeah, so we got Werner von Braun and we built some rockets and that kind of shit. But yeah, no, we didn't absorb the SS, and intimating that we did is not. It's just misinformed for one thing, and you spew it as if it's fact, but it's not. Secondly, look, man, I'm educated in political science. I majored in political science, and the definition of fascism does not fit Israel. Um, they they are they're a democratic form of government, so they elect their leadership. They change leadership pretty often. And fascism, one of the hallmarks is typically a cult of personality, a persistent, like a single leader. It rarely goes past one generation, although North Korea, you could argue that it's fascist. China, right at the moment, is arguably fascist because they have companies that are basically under the control of the government and yet not nominally owned by the government. Um, you have party meetings inside, companies that are supposedly civilian companies that are supposedly privately owned. That was the Nazis did that. That's a very fascist thing to do, and usually, typically, it also has an ethnic like an air of ethnic superiority, which the Chinese do have. The Russians also have that, and are arguably fascist. Israel, it's really difficult to argue that they're fascist. So when you claim that, it's hyperbolic and it's weak. Because it's a really sad thing to misuse the word fascist, and to me, it immediately identifies a lack of education, a lack of understanding of what fascism really is. Fascism is actually a brand of Marxism. The first fascists were in Italy, the people who developed fascism, and they were all Marxists. And they basically asserted that Marx was right at the time, but since industrialization, things and they also disagreed on the international aspect. So I heard one of the commenters talk about globalists. Marxists are typically globalists. That's why the song of the Communist Party is called the Internationale. Because it's workers of the world unite, and that's where globalism comes from. Because and that's why people, the collectivists in our country who call
10
themselves democratic
seconds.
socialists,
Mhm.
want open borders. Is because they honestly believe that sovereign nations don't really exist because the world should be just communist or Marxist socialist is what they call it, because communism's got a bad uh, name uh, these days because it's
And
failed so often.
all right, time. All right, guess dude, you got a reply for that one?
All right, so
All right.
I'm curious which definition of fascism you're using, because it sounds like you're using the post Umberto Eco ghost of fascism definitions that blended into you misusing one quote from Mussolini that is anachronistic and most likely apocryphal, that stated that fascism is the merger of the state and the corporate. When I'm using the direct essay of Mussolini, now the direct essay of Mussolini, the key points that show that Israel meets the standard are the state is above all else. The citizens are beholden to the state through service. The state is a mystical entity that is above all else. These are key principles of Mussolini's essay on fascism. The fact that everything you described for all the other nations that you listed out that meet this definition of fascism, this nebulous one you were utilizing, North Korea isn't even a viable state. It's an estate. It's essentially the Kim family's property. So it doesn't even meet the definition of a nation state. The population has been so deprived of even linguistic unity that people leaving it don't have a word for love except for love for the Kim family. Russia doesn't meet the definition of a fascist state because they are a oligarchic, federalist, corrupt system that is federalized constitution that doesn't actually function the way it should, that has led to oligarchic rule through previous mafias and mobs that were running the black markets during the Soviet Union. China is Maoist through and through, which is just an extension, which is just a merger of Confucianist Chinese philosophy and Lenin Stalinism. So Israel meets the standard. The state is above all else. The state is required service to. And yes, Marxism and the thoughts of Marxism did lead to the birth of fascism. But it first had to go through syndicalism. And then the syndicalist broke away and created fascism underneath Mussolini. Fascism was entirely a concept of Mussolini. And Mussolini structured very simply what is the definition of a fascist state. And if you read his essay, only
15
one
seconds.
nation currently on the planet meets the standard for a fascist state, and it's Israel underneath Netanyahu.
All right, Skip, you got to
You got
reply for that one.
Oh, absolutely, because the terms that the definition that he's using is very nebulous. The state is above all else. Who said that? Who the fuck in Israel said that?
Mussolini
Because
no
no.
Mussolini,
Who in Israel said that? Like
their
what? I
entire
mean, when
premise
did
is on the
Netanyahu
concept
stand
of
up?
forming their entire concept is about forming a state for Jews. That is the entire
Okay,
premise and establishment of Israel as a nation state, is to form a state for Jews, a state that is
okay.
unified
So
above
Only
all
because they
else.
were wiped
all right.
off the
Okay.
map.
So I asked you a question. I didn't ask for a fucking essay. I just asked a simple question. Okay. um this I asked who said the state is above all else, and you give me this bullshit. Nobody said that. Okay. And this mystical bullshit is no. It's Look, in Russia, for instance, I've literally seen video of Putin going into a nominally private company and essentially firing people. Okay. So when the government is so involved in private businesses that they can literally go in and tell them what they're going to do, that is reminiscent of fascist Italy or fascist, or basically Nazi Germany, which it could be argued that there were significant differences between Nazism and fascism, but they were very, very similar. They were national socialists rather than international socialists, which is why the communists hated them. Okay, because they were only interested in, for instance, the German National Socialists were only interested in perfecting a collectivist system in Germany. Okay, as opposed to freeing all the proletariat of the whole fucking planet, like what the Russians wanted to do. Okay, so yeah, that no, China is actually quite arguably fascist, because there is a cult of personality there, just like there is with Putin's Russia. In Z, he is very much a cult of personality, and they supposedly have opened up and created, they've got something of a free market, right? Creating billionaires, which China has quite a few of them now, is anathema to Maoism. It is anathema to Marxism. So then it is not communism. It is not Maoism that they're functioning under. And yet the fact that they can go in when somebody gets a yacht that's a little too ostentatious, that they will then bring him up on charges. And the charges that they filed against one of those billionaires who had a too ostentatious of a yacht was abuse of the people's property. So how do you charge that, huh? When he had a private company, that is the kind of control that happened when Willie Messerschmitt was not able to get into his plant in Germany, even though his name was on the fucking building. Okay, so don't sit here and fill me with this crap about China being Maoist. They're absolutely not Maoist at this point. You cannot create billionaires in a Maoist system. So just even saying that is just ridiculous. And arguing that North Korea is not a nation state, well, by the strict definition, they absolutely are. They have a government, a sovereign government that is able to maintain their borders, and how they treat their people is immaterial to the definition of
30
whether
seconds.
they are or not. Okay, so you could argue they're a failed state, but you can't argue that they're not a state. And arguing that, like I said, man, the hyperbole of, and you're misusing the word fascist, and you're basing it on some like nebulous concepts that are not quantifiable, that you argue that the Israelis have said that they're, it's all, no, actually what they've said their highest value is God. Okay, so it's not the state, it's a religious thing, and that is also anathema to collectivist ideologies like communism. Okay, so dude, like, bring something that's solid, will you?
And all right, now, guess do you got something for that one?
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to start with this first. It's not nebulous. I'm reading directly from Mussolini's own words, the definitions
I'm not
of
arguing that the
fascism.
words aren't there. I'm arguing that
Okay.
how do you quantify those things? How do you quantify the spirit? Huh? How do you quantify that? So you can
Assessment.
apply it to anybody and say, oh yeah, by assessment, by your personal fucking
Are
opinion.
you going to let me
No,
have
I'm
my 3
talking
minutes?
about
Or are you,
things that are observable and empirical, buddy.
except
And you're not doing that.
every observable example you gave of fascism could be applied to radical nationalism, Theodore Roosevelt, and a few other aspects of other societies that have decided to do nationalist projects for nationalist reasons. None of those are fascist. Putin going in and taking over a corporation is not fascist. Billionaires existing underneath a Maoist system is not fascism. And no, North Korea is not a nation state because they don't have a nation.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't. They have a.
Okay, if they're not a nation state, then just walk across their border and see what happens to you. Okay, they do control what happens within those borders, and that is a big part of being a nation state.
Can I have my 3 minutes, or are you just like I'm starting to get really get vibes off of your 37 years of career, and like I'm understanding
31.
exactly the type of guy you were in the military. So
I call
thanks for
bullshit
that.
when I see it. I call absolute bullshit when I see it, and you've been spewing it. You've been spewing
No,
it the whole fucking time I was listening. That's why I said I want to talk to this clown.
Let's throw this point out. You were so gung ho to be like, I got a political science degree.
I
Okay,
do.
let me challenge you. Let me challenge you with mine. I have a philosophy degree with backings in history minors and religion minors. I've studied
Woo.
the philosophies behind the politics you play at.
Yeah, but you don't seem to understand the politics themselves. You don't
No, I
understand, like
understand the politics.
you don't even
You're the one
understand
who's
how to
overusing the
recognize a
term
communist
fascist for
regime
everything
from
you
a
don't like.
fascist
It's
regime.
funny how every nation you don't like suddenly becomes fascist. It's no different than a liberal running around calling everyone who's
No.
Trump Nazi.
It's funny how the
You
people
are
who
acting
call
like a
Trump a
liberal.
Nazi behave more like fascists than Trump ever does.
Yeah, but you're running
I mean,
around.
that's the thing. And you're doing the same thing.
Using
You're
false
calling the
logic.
Israelis fascists, and then
No, I'm stating their
you're
state
letting the
operates.
Chinese off with
I'm
they say they're
no.
Maoists, so you're going to take them at their word. Look at the way that
Maoism's just as
their
toxic of
country
an
runs.
ideology. Maoism is just as toxic as an ideology.
Now we do want to let guest dude finish. I did let you guys go through the back and forth because I did want to find out.
So here's the thing.
All right, now guest dude, you go ahead and start.
you want to use this definition nebulously on any enemy that you don't like, because you know the origin myth of the modern age is we beat the shit out of the fascists and Nazis. So anytime you lambast an enemy with that term, it really works against them. It's the reason Russia used it against Ukraine. Oh, they're Nazis. This is why we're going to invade them. It's why it's a shit argument, when in reality you have to look at what the definition of fascism was from the creator of fascism, what he laid down as the rules, and then go and assess. When you look at
Mussolini did not create fascism. For fuck's sake, bro. Mussolini was like an understudy to the group that actually developed it.
yeah, except
Like,
he was
you
the
don't
guy.
even know that. You think
Except
he was
he's
the
the guy.
guy who defined it.
Except he's the
No,
guy who
they
put the
actually, his
goddamn thing
writings about it were actually considered kind of amateurish.
Except he's the only
He
guy who
wrote
actually
crap that the
instituted.
people
Except he's the
sucked
only
up.
guy who instituted a nation with fascism and ruled over it. So I'm going to go with
No, he's not.
he probably knew what the fuck
No,
he
he's
was
not.
doing.
No, he's not. I mean,